My friend from Michigan, and I appreciate the engagement from the co-sponsor of the legislation, my friend from Washington. I appreciate the continued discussion on this. I do take strong exception to the characterization that my amendment would make quote-unquote guinea pigs out of our veterans. In fact, I think if anything, not amending the legislation makes guinea pigs out of our veterans and cuts out our veterans. Our homeless veterans, our other than honorable discharge veterans who, under an unamended version of this bill, will jeopardize veterans because it will put them in a position where they will go right back into an environment that they need to be extricated from. The lack of an option for sober living for vulnerable homeless veterans struggling from addiction, and forcing them into a housing first model that does not extricate them from the conditions and the environment in which they came is a real problem. And it is simply not true that this is an experiment. The idea that somehow there's no evidence to support this is totally wrong. In fact, when you combine shelter with case management, when you combine shelter with services, wraparound services, when you actually care for the veterans instead of just putting them into a warehouse, if you actually care for them and look at who they are and take them for who they are and meet them where they are as people who are struggling, who have served their country, who are brave soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, but they fell on hard times and maybe were other than honorably discharged, but they deserve something better than just a roof over their head. They deserve something a lot better. They deserve love and care. They deserve our appreciation to the point where we are actually taking care of their issues. And so what I would say is, far from being an experiment, the evidence is overwhelming to suggest that when you combine shelter with actually care and treatment and services and a 12-step program and financial literacy and job training, you get a far better evidence-based result. You get self-sufficiency, you get self-esteem, you get a job, you get savings, you get someone who can continue to serve his or her country, and you don't jeopardize their recovery by putting them with other people who are in active addiction. So, let me clarify one other thing that maybe was misunderstood about the actual amendment that I offered. This is not a ban, as has been described, on Housing First. For some veterans, maybe a Housing First program is good for them and available for them. This does not leave our veterans homeless. This does not leave them under bridges. If there's a Housing First program that they can go into, this bill, as amended by my proposed amendment, it would allow those Housing First programs to continue, but it would also make HUD-VASH available to many of these organizations. Some are faith-based, some are not. Some are not-for-profit, but programs that actually work, programs that have a track record of working, not just of warehousing homeless veterans, but actually caring for them, appreciating their service enough to give them more than just shelter. And let me just finish this. One final point, and I'll yield. To the extent that there is a concern that there is not enough housing stock out there for affordable housing for homeless veterans, true. That's true. And my amendment would enlarge the housing stock available to homeless veterans. It wouldn't shrink it. It would enlarge it because you're bringing to bear resources and organizations that would not otherwise be eligible for HUD-VASH vouchers. So quite the opposite of what my friend was suggesting in terms of not enough, providing enough housing stock. This would enlarge the number of organizations that would be able to serve our veterans, and frankly, it would enhance it because it would bring to bear more than just shelter. It would give them a loving home where people actually care about them and care about their long-term recovery. I'll yield.
Will the gentleman yield?
No, I will not. I've got 23 seconds left. I want to associate myself with the comments from my friend from Kentucky, and that's the experience that I've seen, as well as the son of a disabled World War II veteran and having a number of family members involved and engaged in this. This is a serious issue that we need to address. I believe that the gentleman's amendment improves the underlying bill, which I also applaud. And with that, my time has expired, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
Strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Barr, if you are truly interested in helping our veterans, I don't argue. I don't argue with your points. But why do you want to come and muddy the water on Mr. Heck and Ms. Axton's bill? If you feel so sincere about what you're doing, introduce your bill. Let us roll with that. But why would you want to come and muddy this water? Let me tell you something. What Mr. Heck and Ms. Agnew are doing here is taking the first step. I don't care whatever status our veterans are in. What we're doing with this bill is we're gathering in the sheep. We're gathering the people who are laying on the viaducts, people who are out there suffering. Get them in. Don't put a condition on them to say, hey, we'll take you, but go get yourself sober. Go get your, well, hell, if with that, they don't even need us. We'd leave them out there to drift in the misty flats of life. And that is why we have 20 veterans committing suicide every single day. And more will do it if we muddy up this effort. So what I'm saying to you is your thoughts, your ideas have a nobility of purpose, yes, to make sure they get the treatment, to make sure of all that. But if we leave them out on the street and don't bring them in, that's doing even a more mighty disturbance. No, I'm not going to yield to you. I'm going to yield my time to Mr. Hecht. And if he doesn't take it all, I have a little more to say about this. But I want Mr. Hecht to have a little bit of time here. Go ahead, Mr. Hecht.
I thank the gentleman from Georgia. I felt for a moment there like I was a little bit in Alice to the Looking Glass. Things kept getting curiouser and curiouser because the gentleman from Kentucky was literally describing shelter with wraparound services as the important, most effective, most humane way to approach homeless veterans. And he's right. But the fact is, shelter with wraparound services is the very definition of housing first. What he seeks to do is lock the front door of any veteran who has not first overcome those issues in their lives. So let's be clear, what he argued for, shelter with wraparound services, that is housing first. That's why we ought to oppose this amendment. And I yield back to the gentleman from Georgia.
Continue my point, Mr. Barr. And you know, we're friends. We've worked together. And I admire what you're doing. But we have this bill positioned as a strong bipartisan bill. I would hope that you could withdraw that amendment, and I will make this commitment to you. If you introduce what you're talking about on a bill, I will gladly co-sponsor that bill with you, providing, of course, you do something that you have omitted in this amendment. All the things you're talking about are wonderful things to help and to do. but they cost money. You have not even combined or attached any funding to this. If you really want to do the drug treatment, you want to do that, I agree with you. There are other things we need to do. But let us gather them in. Let us get them into this program. I yield back, Mr.
Thanks to my friend from Missouri. And again, thank you to the gentleman from Washington, and especially to my friend, the gentleman from Georgia. And let me just say, I didn't have time to say this earlier, but I really appreciated the beautiful, literally the beautiful speech that you gave in support of this bill in the first instance. And the references to Scripture, absolutely, your heart is in the right place. I think all of our heart is in the right place. We love our veterans. We care about them so desperately. We want them to receive everything that they deserve, what they've given to us, which is our very freedom. And they sacrificed everything up to the point of their lives for us. So we all want the very, very best for them. And I appreciate your offer too, and I want to talk to you more about that. But I want to just address the point that, the good point that Mr. Heck made about what the purpose of a HUD-VASH voucher is. And this is a really important part of this conversation. What my amendment would not do, would not eliminate Housing First. Let's just be clear. If there's a veteran that wants a HUD-VASH voucher and go into a Housing First program, no conditions, the legislation would still be available for that kind of a service. What my amendment specifically would do is expand the range of housing providers beyond that to other additional housing providers that have additional programming. Some of it's taxpayer funded, some of it's not. They already have the money. Some of it's faith-based. Some of these are churches. The St. James Place in Lexington, Kentucky, and I invite my friend from Georgia to visit. You'd love it. You'd love this place. You'd love the people there, especially the veterans that are getting great care there. I want to introduce you to these people and show you what they do. They take homeless, typically addicted veterans. Some of them have mental health challenges. Some of them do not. All heroes to our country, by the way. And they're not just housing them, but they give them financial literacy. They give them Dave Ramsey classes. They give them a 12-step program. They give them a mandatory savings program. They get them jobs. And you know what they do at the end of their program? They are 80% plus long-term, non-subsidized housing with a job, with savings, with financial literacy, with self-esteem, and they are on the road to recovery. And they are contributing members of society beyond their wildest imagination before. That is a track record of success. And so what I would say is, let's remember what a HUD-VASH voucher is all. And by the way, that group is not eligible for a HUD-VASH voucher. They can't get HUD-VASH vouchers because HUD-VASH is Housing First, and they are not Housing First. So they can't use HUD-VASH vouchers to treat those homeless veterans. That's the problem that I'm trying to highlight. And let me just say this. The whole point of HUD-VASH, this is to the gentleman from Washington's point, the whole point, as he makes a very good argument, the HUD-VASH program is, by its very nature, conditional. This idea that we shouldn't have conditions. No, HUD-VASH is, by its very definition, a condition-based program. A non-veteran can't get it. The condition is you have to be a veteran. So this idea that we can't attach conditions to HUD-VASH doesn't make sense. It is only open to veterans, so a non-veteran would be ineligible, and shelter must be matched with services, which is exactly the opposite of Housing First. HUD-VASH, when it was designed, was not supposed to be Housing First. It was the opposite of Housing First. It was supposed to be a combination of housing and services. And so all we're saying here is, let's improve the bill. And by the way, I'm going to support the bill. The bill's a good bill. We need to extend eligibility beyond just honorable discharges. These are the veterans that need the most help typically. But these are also the veterans that need more than just shelter, and they need a drug-free environment.
Would the gentleman?
I will.
Okay.
Excuse me, the time is mine.
Oh, May.
And I will yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from Georgia.
Okay. All well and good, Mr. Barr. And I'm sure those programs are wonderful in Kentucky. We have some similar programs in Georgia. But we do not need to move from the housing first. We don't need to move from that. And that's what your amendment would do. Secondly, your amendment has required tremendous resources
I yield back
to
to the
do
balance
what
of
you
my time.
want, and you have no money there.
My time to Mr. Barr from Kentucky.
I appreciate my friend from Arkansas, and he's exactly right. That's not only the letter of the amendment, that is the intent of the amendment, not to take away from a chronically homeless person that just needs shelter, but to expand HUD-VASH eligibility to those organizations that actually do what HUD-VASH was intended to do, which is not just to provide a roof, but to provide the wraparound case management services, the addiction recovery services, the financial literacy, the job training, the things that actually will help. Now, in the 14 seconds remaining, I want to take up the offer from my friend from Georgia. I will withdraw my amendment in the spirit of bipartisanship. And I want to work with you on this, on a bill that would do exactly what I'm suggesting, and do it in a bipartisan way. Do it in a bipartisan way.
Absolutely. Would the gentleman yield for a minute?
The gentleman has no more time.
He withdrew it.
The gentleman from Colorado is recognized for 5 minutes.
He would.
Who withdrew?
I yield to
Madam
Mr.
Chair,
Scott.
the offer from Mr. Barr was
Gentleman
to,
is recognized.
I don't, parliamentary inquiry.
Yes.
Does the debate continue if the gentleman
I'm
withdraws
sorry,
his
I
amendment?
did not hear an offer to withdraw. If the gentleman withdraws, the withdrawal is certainly respected and accepted. Is there further debate on the amendment,
I want to say thank you.
I guess I yield back.
the bill? No further debate
thank you.
on the amendment, on the bill. Is there further debate on the bill?
Madam Chair,
The
it's
gentleman
not withdrawn.
can't be recognized.
I'd like a colloquy with Mr. Scott on this, if possible.
Sure.
It's my time.
First-
I
The
yield to
gentleman-
Mr. Scott.
Will the
Thank you.
gentleman suspend? The gentleman from Colorado is
Thank you, Madam Chair.
recognized.
I yield to Mr. Scott to have a colloquy with Mr. Barr.
Thank you.
First, Mr. Barr, let me say thank you. Thank you very much. We all deeply appreciate that. Let me also add that the points that you have made are good points. And yes, I would like to work with you. But in the process of our working, we still have to maintain and not disturb the housing first. That is important. But all the other things, and then secondly, I would really work with you because it would be a little value if all of the great things that you mentioned that are needed, once we're able to gather and get them in, is going to require funding. And that is the area that I think we need to concentrate on because your noble ideas are very worthy.
Will the gentleman yield on that?
But we got to put the money there to put it. Yes, sir.
Will the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir. I will.
Thank you for your courtesy, for your willingness to work, and I'm interested in making this a totally unanimous vote in support of Mr. Heck's bill and Mr. Stiver's bill because it's a good bill and I support it.
Right.
I want the discussion. I don't want it to be a debate. This is a discussion about how we can enhance help for homeless veterans other than honorable discharge veterans. That's what this is about. And so if it takes a bipartisan effort separate and apart from this, that's what I want to engage you on. And you make a good point. Absolutely. St. James Place could use additional resources in terms of the wraparound services that they provide and other organizations that do that as well. So I'm absolutely willing to work with you on that point. I do want to just underscore the original intent of the amendment, which was not to take away anything from Housing First programs, as my friend from Arkansas pointed out. It doesn't deny HUD-VASH vouchers for these Housing First programs. What it would do, and what I would hope the legislation that you and I intend to work on will do, is expand the universe of housing providers that would be eligible for a HUD-VASH voucher for either an honorable discharge or other than honorable discharge veteran. So we would be expanding the universe. And so I'd yield to you if that's something that you would be willing to
Yes,
do.
it would be, and it's important, as was pointed out to me, to note that while HUD-VASH is well-funded, and we do have money going towards there, it's very important that we sit down and include HUD in this, HUD and the VA in this, to make sure that what you and I come up with and the rest of the committee, that we are not offering something and not putting the financial resources there to make sure that it is done.
I accept your offer. I withdraw my amendment, and I thank my colleagues on both sides of the aisle. And I look forward to working with all of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to provide not just shelter for these deserving homeless heroes, but something more than that. And that is their dignity back. And that is a job. And it's financial literacy and all the wonderful things that they deserve.
Yes.
And I appreciate the gentleman from Georgia for working with me on that.
Absolutely, and again, I appreciate the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Barr. You're a real good stand-up guy. We really appreciate it. I know your passion on this. I look forward to working with you.
right.
And
I'm gonna
again,
reclaim
thank
my
you
time.
for that.
I'm going to reclaim my time. I'm glad that each of you two appreciates the other and that you're going to work together. And with that, I yield back to the chair.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Kentucky withdraws his amendment. Is there further discussion of our amendments on H.R. 2398? If not, the question now occurs on approving the amendment in the nature of a substitute. All in favor, say aye. Those opposed, nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment in the nature of a substitute is agreed to.